Hello!
Hello!
And welcome to We've Got to Try and Shout Over the Chickens vlog.
They're all watching me.
We've got an audience this morning, and not in a good way. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago, and we showed you the bees waggle dance? And I was dressed up in the bee suit. Well, at the end of that vlog, I said that if you've got any questions to leave them in the comments on that vlog. Do you remember?
I do.
And I was having a look through, and most of them basically were comments about that shadow on my leg. I meant comments about the bees and questions about the bees and stuff. Anyway, I had a good look through. What? I had a Mars bar and a cup of coffee and went through them all and started writing down the good ones. And I've chosen 10 that I think are quite interesting.
We got that many?
That we're going to answer today. Question number 1 then is exactly how do bees make honey, and will you be selling any? Well, I don't know if you actually want to know this, because it might put you off honey for the rest of your life.
It would.
But I'm going to tell you anyway. So it all starts when a worker bee goes out to forage, and she's looking for nectar, which is like natural sugar water. And when she's found some, she sucks up the nectar with her abnormally long tongue. I should have been a worker bee with my abnormally long tongue, shouldn't I? I don't know why, it doesn't normally make you laugh. Anyway, she stores the nectar in a second stomach called the honey stomach, and that's where enzymes start to break it down into simple sugars. While it's doing that, she heads back to the hive, and then when she gets there, she regurgitates the nectar into another bee's mouth. And then that bee chews on it for about half an hour, a bit like he chews on bacon rind, like your granddad used to,
Yes.
without his teeth in.
Yeah.
And then that bee regurgitates it from its honey stomach into another bee's mouth, and that bee swallows it, and that bee chews on it for half an hour.
I know.
And regurgitates it, and all the while they're getting rid of water from the nectar, and the enzymes are breaking it down. Now eventually, after it's been through a few bees' mouths and stomachs, the final bee regurgitates it again, but this time into one of the cells on the honeycomb. By this point, it's still a little bit too watery, so the bees have a special trick to get the water down a little bit. Do you want to see what it is?
Yes.
Dry out your No, I'm only joking. They use the wings and they fan dry it like that.
They flap.
And once the moisture content gets less than 20%, they wax it over and seal it and store it, and it preserves it like we do when we put it in jars, and it preserves it. And then they eat it over the winter, or if there's an excess, we can take that and we can eat it. Now it takes 12 bees their entire life to make 1 teaspoon of honey.
Wow.
That's a lot, in it. That's how much work they put into it. Now our colonies are still quite young. The oldest one is only about a year old, and they are producing a little bit of honey this year, which we'll be able to harvest in a few weeks, hopefully, fingers crossed. But the other apiary, they are still a new colony, so it's probably going to be next year before we start getting any decent amounts of honey.
Yes.
Next question then is, Colin, you've now got 20 hives. Aren't you worried about the impact that's going to have on the wild bee population? Well, short answer is no, and I'll tell you why. According to the bee boffins, yeah, they do exist. For every 1 average acre of land, you can have 2 average-sized colonies of bees. So for my 20 hives, that would mean that I'd need 10 acres of land. The thing is, the bees don't really think about constraints and boundaries, and they don't stay within the certain acreage. They can fly, as I've mentioned in previous videos, up to 3 miles or even more from the hive looking for pollen and nectar. So let's follow the bee buffin's theory, and let's follow our bee leaving its hive and flying about 3 miles away. Now, let's draw a map and circle a 3-mile radius from this apiary. Now, that works out at just over 18,000 acres in that 3-mile radius. That's enough land, according to the bee boffin's theory, to sustain up to about 36,000 colonies of bees. Now, the last estimation I can find online for wild bee numbers up here in the Highlands is that for every 150 acres of land, there's one wild colony and up to 20,000 solitary wild bees. That works out at about 140 wild colonies of bees in this 18,000 acre radius, which is about 7 times more bees than I've got on my apiaries. Now let's add my 20 hives, and that still only takes it to 160 colonies in total for this 18,000 acre radius. Now let's not take this theory and these numbers too seriously, because there's so many ifs and buts and maybes and variables that it's very difficult to get an exact figure. But what I do think it shows very clearly is that within this 3-mile radius, these 18,000 acres, is that the total number of bees is calculated at less than half of 1% of what the bee boffins suggest is sustainable. And the land here is nearly all wild anyway. I think where you are does play a big part in that theory. If you have managed colonies that have got diseases in areas where you've got wild bees, that can impact that population. Also, you could have many managed hives like this in cities or urban areas where there's not a lot for the bees to forage, so that can have an impact on the wild bees. But where we are, in the Highlands of Scotland, the population, human population, is very low, and there's just so much for them to go and forage. Let me give you a bit of a visual perspective on this. This is what the bees are currently foraging on. It's beautiful. It's wild Scottish heather, and it started flowering towards the end of July. Right now it's created this sea of purple that stretches right across the landscape, as far as the eye can see and in every direction that you look. There's quite literally tens of thousands of acres of it, and the bees are working overtime as you'd expect, especially when the weather's this beautiful. They're trying to collect as much of its nectar and pollen as they can to store for the winter before the heather starts to turn and die away in a couple of weeks. So as you can see, there's not only more than enough for my bees and all the wild bees, but there could be enough for thousands more bees as well.
Question 3. Are there any plants or flowers we shouldn't plant in the garden that are toxic to bees?
That's a good question. There are a few. There's not many in the UK. One of the worst ones over in America is the Californian buckeye. There's the swamp titty. Or TT, I don't know.
I don't know.
The yellow jessamine is one, the mountain laurel, black nightshade, corn lilies, zigadinus. It sounds like that Spice Girls song, doesn't it? Zigga Zigga.
Zigga Zigga.
Angelica triqueta, I hope I'm saying these right, and the feckled milk velch.
Feckled!
Feckled milk velch, not to be, I got velch.
No, don't go there. Don't go there.
Elsewhere around the world, there's the Astragalus, which is like a herb, like a small shrub, tea plants, tilia tree, and the Ochrama Lagopus, which is a deciduous angiosperm. No, you're a deciduous angiosperm. There's a species of rhododendron in Turkey. And it's said that the honey made from the nectar of that was the world's first ever chemical weapon.
Wow.
And the bees used to take the nectar and turn it into honey like ours did. But if you ate the honey, it made you sick. It made you feel sick, and it made you dizzy, and you could even get paralysed.
Wow.
Back in 65 BC, that's before Coronation Street.
Yeah.
King Mithridates, the Great of Pontus, he used to take the honeycombs and put them at the side of the road where the invading Roman armies of Pompeii would see the honey, scoff it down, and ended up poisoning themselves with it.
Oh my.
And then the king would get his armies to come back and slay them while they were all laid out paralysed.
Not a nice man.
It's also said to be a good aphrodisiac.
Is it?
Don't put in the don't put in the comments though, because I don't know whether you kind of rub it in or eat it. I don't know.
I prefer Viagra.
Don't swallow it. Most of the really dangerous plants, toxic to bees anyway, are not in the UK, they're around the world. But if you want to plant flowers that the bees do love, there's a lot of online sites and shops that sell bee-friendly flowers or seeds and seed bombs that are quite easy to plant.
Yeah.
We've come inside for this one, but we need some props anyway.
Yes.
Question number 4. Is it true that a bee dies after it stings you? Yeah, it is. It's quite sad, really.
Yeah.
When a bee chooses to sting you, it has these 2 barbed lancets that it digs into you. And they look a little bit like these kitchen steak knives. Now you can see the serrated edges on them. So when the bee stings you, it basically comes in and they move forwards to bring the other one in. It basically digs into the skin like that. There's a little tube that runs through the middle of it, and that's where she injects the poison, the toxin called apitoxin. That's what causes the pain. But the thing is once she's got those dug into your skin, she can't just release them. And she starts to panic, and she'll be pulling and pulling and pulling to try and get away. And what happens is it actually detaches from her body, but it's connected to her abdomen and muscles and nerves inside. And it basically pulls all those out of her body as she's panicking to get away. And that just causes such injury inside that she dies a few moments later. It's quite sad, isn't it?
It is quite sad.
Now you might be asking yourself, how come wasps and hornets and other stinging beasties can sting again after they've already stung? And that's because their lancets are nice and smooth.
Right.
So it's easier for them to pull out than it is for a honeybee. What? I'm trying to tell a sad story and you're just thinking about how easy it is to pull out, aren't you? Next question is, how does the smoker work and why does it calm the bees? Okay, well, this is the smoker. It's called a smoker because it produces smoke. Usually I burn either straw or hay or old coffee hessian sacks. It's all natural, so there's nothing nasty in there that can hurt the bees. The smoke doesn't actually calm the bees or makes them sleepy. If the bees sense that they're in danger or under attack, they release a pheromone and it's called isopentyl acetate. It comes from a gland down near the stingers and it wafts through the hive, alerting the other bees, and they get ready to protect the home by attacking. So giving the bees a little bit of smoke masks that attack pheromone and stops it from spreading through the hive. Another effect is that if you smell smoke, you think there's a fire, and they'll think that the hive is on fire, and that triggers an instinct for them to go and eat as much honey as they can because they think they're going to have to leave the hive because it's on fire and find a new home. We've all had that feeling when we've eaten too much and it's difficult even just to bend down and tie our shoelaces. So because the bees have eaten so much honey, they're going to be a little bit slower, and that makes them a little bit less likely to be darting for you to sting you. They're too interested in eating and getting out of there. Now, I don't actually use much smoke anymore because the bees have got used to me. Of course, they have their bad days, so I've always got one lit and ready in case I need it. But most of the time, I don't use it at all. They're actually pretty calm.
Question 6. How do bees know which hive to go into?
Ah, well, good question. Bees are excellent navigators, and they use different ways, like their sense of smell, the position of the sun, landmarks, and even the Earth's magnetic field, because remember, they have like magnetic things in their belly.
They have a magnet abdomen.
A magnetic albumen. To be honest, they're not really that much different from humans. Think about it. We build rows and rows of terraced houses and estates and huge apartment blocks that can house thousands of people. But we still remember where we live. Sometimes, though, bees do go into other hives that are not theirs. It's a bit like when Sean's had a drink and he walks into other people's houses. It's called drifting. And a little bit like when Sean does it, sometimes if the guard bees accept them, if they're quite good bees, they'll let them in and sometimes let them settle there. Other times they won't and they'll kick them out. Question number 7 is, why are there different colours of honeybees in the UK? That's quite a simple one to answer. When you look at honeybees, most of them have got a brown body with an orangey yellow rings around their abdomen. But some of them can be quite a lot darker, some of them are almost black. And you do see some bees, some worker bees, that are a lot lighter, like a light grey or a light brown. But why so many different colours? And sometimes in one hive you'll get different colours. Well, you've got to remember that the worker gets half of her genetic material from her mum, the queen, and the other half from her dad, who is one of the drones she mated with. When a virgin queen goes out to mate, she can receive sperm from up to a dozen or more different drones, and she stores all that sperm and keeps it for the rest of her life. So when she's laying eggs in the hive, each egg could be from one of about 12 different drones. And so you've got different subfamilies being raised within the hive, and that explains why some of them can be different colours.
Question 8. It's dark inside the hive, so how do the bees see the waggle dance?
Another good question. Well, for a start, bees have got 5 eyes. Imagine if you had 5 eyes.
Wow.
Where would you have the other 3? I'd put one on each finger. That could be fun, wouldn't it? And I'd put the other one down there so that I could wink at you when it's time for bitches. Bees can see types of light that we can't.
Right.
But they can also sense things on them in the dark.
Like midges.
Now, it's a bit like when Sean farts in bed on a night and pulls the duvet over my head and holds it down. Now, I can't see anything at that point.
But he knows it's there.
But I know it, I can smell it, and geez, I can taste it. I can almost chew on it sometimes. And that's what I mean about using different sensors in the dark. And the bees are the same. I'm sure they don't fart and pull the duvet over one another, but they can sense things. They can sense types of vibration. The way that the bees flap their wings when they're doing the waggle dance, they can sense on their little hairs on the body the types of vibration.
Right.
And it's even said that bees have even got accents, dialects. I would love to hear a Scouse bee, wouldn't you? That would be hilarious.
How do you buzz in Scouse?
Question number 9 is, do the bees recognise humans and do they remember you? Well, there's quite a bit of research being done, experiments and scientific studies and things like that, and the general consensus is yes, bees do recognise humans, but what about individuals? Well, I reckon so, because when I come into this apiary, some of them come out and they're all right, Colin, you all right, Cock, what you been up to? No, they don't. Do they recognise and remember individual people? I don't know. The jury's out on that one. Some beekeepers will say yes, because when they visit the apiary with a friend, the bees are always much calmer with the beekeeper than they are with any visitors. But then again, you'll get beekeepers that say, well, that's because the beekeepers are being calm and they know what they're doing, whereas visitors can be a little bit flappy and panicky with the bees. As for me, I think they do. I think they get used to the humans, to the man in the white suit. They probably don't know what he's doing. They just lift the lid off and cause havoc for a few minutes and then everything's okay again. But I've found that over time, the bees do get calmer. So I think, yeah, I think they do recognise and remember. Final question.
Woo!
Then we can have us tea and us crumpets. Is, will I ever get that image of you in that bee suit out of my head? You never ever will. And I'm not sorry either. I wear it again, I don't know.
Oh.
I hope you've enjoyed the vlog and that you found the questions and the answers entertaining, informative. Maybe you've learnt something about bees. I love the bees.
Yes, you do.
I could do loads of vlogs about the bees. But that's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're not already, please subscribe to our channel. Give the video a thumbs up, hit the notification bell, and then YouTube will tell you every time we release a new video. If you want to help support the channel, be most appreciated.
It would.
There could be a link up above Sean's head on some devices. If it's not up there, it's down in the video description. You can join on Patreon or become a YouTube member, and you get like loads of exclusive photos and videos and blogs and bits of gossip
All
and stuff
sorts.
that we don't put on social media, and it helps to support and keep us running the croft. That'd be lovely, wouldn't it?
It would be smashing.
Take care of yourself. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Ta-ra.
Intro. 3, 2, 1. You tell me when you're ready.
I was, but it were a midge. Bizarre. I wonder who was the first person to think, oh, that bee vomit will taste nice.
Yeah.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
Belch.
They'll be Googling it now.
We are getting bitten now, aren't we?
Yeah. They're everywhere.
It's spitting! Is it true that a bee dies after it's stung? Stunk. Oh. Yep, good job we stopped. Back in a sec.